Hey guys, this is Captain Lincoln with Fireteam Whiskey, and I'm excited to show you this next Warrior Wellness video. I sat down and did an interview with my very first platoon sergeant, and at the time he was Sergeant Keith Schiffer. He retired as a sergeant major, and later on, actually, after I got commissioned as an officer, he was a first sergeant in the battalion that I worked in. He wasn't my first sergeant, but he was first sergeant there in the unit. So him and I crossed paths many times when I was in the military and when he was in the military. And I call him my Army daddy, basically. So he, got me at the age of 17 and was the person who really instilled in me that military discipline, the expectations, the standards that I had to meet, not only as a soldier, but as a person. And I'm blessed to have had not only a father who instilled those things in me, but also my very first leader, platoon sergeant, in my very first unit in the military, was a great example of that. And I'm sure you will notice that he is a man of a lot of knowledge. There's a lot of experience behind his words, and I hope that you listen to him and that you kind of get some of that kind of motivation and installation of someone who has devoted his life to not only his country but also his community as a sheriff's deputy, and that you take his words to heart. First, I want to ask you how many years you did in the Guard, and what your rank was, deployments, and then also your position currently with the Sheriff's Office.
I did 31 years in the Florida Army National Guard, retired as a Sergeant Major. In that 31 years, I had a break of about a year. Thankfully, another soldier talked me into getting back in the Guard, and it worked out. I've been with the Sheriff's Office for over 20 years, 24 years to be correct. Senior Deputy assigned to the Youth Resource Division at Ponte Vedra High School, and basically been in uniform my whole life.
Part of the reason why I wanted to interview you for this, because you have a certain perspective from being a sergeant major and basically an NCO leader your almost your entire career with the military, and my perspective of being in your platoon and having you as my platoon sergeant, what I got from you was the instilling of discipline and how important it is to be disciplined as an individual. And you and I have talked about this specific issue with the current military and what it looks like right now, and then also with the young people who are potentially going to be filling those empty boots and trying to get in the military. So I just wanted to get your perspective on why we have such an issue now in 2018 with obesity and physical fitness failures, not only in the military but with the young people today.
I'd probably have to. When I was growing up, I grew up a military brat, and my dad was in naval aviation, and spent a lot of time around the officers and the hangars around the aircraft and everything, and watched my father as I grew up, and I would have to say at my age, which I'm 60, it was a different time back then. There seemed to be a lot more esprit de corps in the military. Communism was on the march at that time, so there was in America it was kind of like you were proud to be an American on that side. And my dad spent more time away from home than at home, and as I was growing up, I watched that, and the demeanor of the sailors that I was around, and the officers, and they were in shape back then. I don't know the change. I don't know if it's a a lack of discipline at home growing up with these kids, and the amount of products that are out there that can make them obese. And I don't really want to call it laziness. It's just a lack of focus.
What could you say to them to kind of give them that information that this is really important and that you don't want to get to 60 and be one of those 1 out of 4?
Well, I have to say, obviously, watch what you eat. I've been blessed with having been in the military my whole life and an entity that's paramilitary. It starts in here and in the heart as far as how you want to represent yourself to society. This is one thing I would say to the soldiers of today, and even my own brothers in law enforcement, is you have to remember your uniform represents America. And this uniform that I wear right now represents the people of St. Johns County. So when we go in country and we disembark out of an aircraft, you have to remember that the people of the world, or whatever country you're in, they're looking at that uniform. And what they want to see is, and especially when they're looking at the uniform, you have to remember, and same with law enforcement, your enemies are looking at the uniform also. And law enforcement, the criminal element, is looking at this uniform. When we step out of a cruiser, if you're 350 pounds and your belly's hanging over your belt, that doesn't exude terror in the criminal element. When we get off in Bagram Air Base or in Cairo, Egypt, where I was at, or Ankara, and you disembark off the aircraft, you got to remember they're watching you and they're looking at that uniform. The question is that appearance going to put fear into your enemies or the people that dislike us, or are they going to say this is a piece of cake? And that's what I would say to the young kids or young soldiers today is, for the past 40 years I've ironed my uniforms every day, be it military or this uniform, and shined my boots and tucked in my shoestrings. And I've looked in the mirror and I look myself up and down. And that's what I would ask these kids to do today, is to look in the mirror and reflect on what people are going to think about you. And if your enemies aren't afraid of you, then that's a problem. And I guess that's our task. And it has always been my task in the military side. And here's a good example of somebody that was under my tutelage when I was a Platoon Sergeant and First Sergeant, to instill in those troops that we have to be able to accomplish a task, be it slinging a saw over our shoulder or loading trucks, or in this business, a couple of years ago, having to pull a car off of a person that the jack collapsed on them. And you have to be in shape to do these things.
I'm glad you touched upon that, because that's one of the themes that we bring up often in the fitness videos that I do for Fireteam Whiskey, is train like your buddy's life depends on it. And that is, I love that you touched upon that, because that's so important. Not only, somebody in law enforcement, or you're a firefighter, or you're in the military, you don't want to be that guy. You don't want to be that guy that everybody else is looking at and says, man, if the shit hits the fan, I'm not going to be able to depend on that person. That person's going to be a liability to me. That person is probably not going to be able to help me if I get in trouble. So if you would just touch upon how that's important, if you're paired up with somebody and you're deployed, or it's your partner within the sheriff's department, how important that is.
Just touching on the sheriff's department and law enforcement, we depend on each other, just like soldiers depend on each other. One thing I've seen over 25 years doing this business is cops don't call out sick, because when we call out sick, we just can't go in and to the work pool and grab somebody else and fill in. So, you know, we feel like we're letting our fellow workmates down, our shift mates. The military is the same way. If you have a unit that has some esprit de corps and they depend on each other, we can always reflect on the airborne guys or the SEAL guys or these entities that know that they're going into places where the people don't like them. They depend on each other and they're not going to let each other down.